everyone. Welcome back for another deep dive. We've got a lot of ground to cover today.
Yeah, a whole bunch of stuff happening in the tech world.
Yeah,
And it's moving so fast.
it really is. So we thought, let's hit pause for a second, just take a breath and break it all down.
Right. Give everyone the need-to-know info from all these different reports we've been looking at.
Exactly. Cybersecurity, the whole social media landscape, mobile updates, some really interesting stuff happening in space.
Oh, and of course, gaming, AI. Can't forget AI.
And the never-ending saga of TikTok. I mean, where do we even begin with that one?
Well, we're going to try to make sense of it all today.
That's the plan. Give you that clear, digestible breakdown you can actually use, without having to sift through a million headlines.
That's what we're here for.
Exactly. So let's jump right in. One of the first things that really stood out to me was this Washington Post report about the National Security Council. Apparently, they've been using personal Gmail accounts for, government business, which kind of raises some eyebrows, to say the least.
Yeah, especially when you consider the level of, well, sensitivity of the information they're dealing with. National security stuff. This report specifically names National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and one of his senior aides.
Right. And we know that standard email doesn't exactly have the greatest track record when it comes to security.
Exactly. No end-to-end encryption like you'd get with something like GPG. Eva Galperin from the EFF, she's an expert on this, and she's pointed out how these emails could be intercepted even on Google servers, potentially.
So for our listeners out there, just think about it. What if sensitive government data was just, I don't know, floating around out there because someone used their personal email?
It's a thought, isn't it?
It is. And, it's not like the government doesn't have access to secure systems.
Right. They have business-grade email, internal networks, all designed for this kind of communication.
So it begs the question, why use Gmail? Is it just a matter of convenience trumping security? Or is there something else going on?
It's a good question. And then there's the whole issue of archiving official communications, for transparency and accountability.
Yeah.
If they're using personal accounts, those emails could easily get lost.
Oh, absolutely. And let's not forget that whole thing with NSC leaders using Signal to talk about military actions.
Oh, right. And they even added a journalist to that chat.
Which, even though Signal is generally considered more secure than regular email, the Pentagon itself has warned about its vulnerabilities.
Yeah. It's a reminder that no system is perfect. Right?
Definitely not. And what's interesting is that, according to NSC spokesperson Adrian Watson, there haven't been any reported repercussions for these actions yet.
So it makes you wonder, what does that say about the culture of data security at these high levels?
Yeah.
I mean, for anyone listening who's concerned about their own data, it's definitely something to think about.
All right, let's switch gears a bit. Let's talk about what's been happening in the world of social media. There's been a pretty big development in Arkansas. A federal judge blocked their social media age verification law.
Act 689. That was the one requiring social media companies to verify the age of users under 18, right?
Yeah.
And get parental consent.
Exactly. A lot of people were watching to see how that would play out.
Well, it seems like the judge put a stop to it, at least for now. Judge Timothy Brooks, he ruled that the law was way too broad and basically unconstitutional because it restricts free speech.
He even said something like Arkansas was using a hatchet when they needed a scalpel.
Which is a pretty striking image, right?
It is. Like, they were trying to solve a problem, but their solution was way too heavy-handed.
Exactly. And he also pointed out that the law was really vague about which services it applied to. So something like Snapchat, which is mainly direct messaging, might not even be covered.
It's interesting, right? Because on the one hand, you want to protect younger users online.
Of course.
But on the other hand, you have freedom of speech and privacy concerns.
And then you have NetChoice, which is this tech industry group that fought against the law. They're obviously happy with the ruling, calling it a win for people not having to hand over their IDs and biometric data just to speak their minds online.
It's a tricky situation, isn't it?
It is. Because even though the Arkansas Attorney General said they respect the decision, they're also looking at their options. So it might not be over yet.
And this whole debate is playing out in other states too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Utah passed their own age verification requirement, but for app stores. And then there's that Texas law, the one about age verification on porn sites. That's going before the Supreme Court. So this issue isn't going away anytime soon.
Not at all. And it really raises some important questions for everyone. Like, how do we find that balance between protecting kids, but also making sure everyone can express themselves freely online?
Yeah, it's a tough one.
All right, let's move on to something a little lighter. Apple users in South Korea are finally getting the Find My feature.
Oh, wow. It took them long enough, didn't it?
I know, it's been available pretty much everywhere else for a while now.
So what was the holdup?
Well, it seems like it had to do with South Korean laws about government access to location data. They probably had to figure out how to make Find My work without compromising user privacy.
Makes sense. It shows how even something like a basic feature can be affected by different regulations around the world.
Right. But hey, it's finally here. And as David Dorn from Apple said, it's all about helping people locate their loved ones and their stuff. And it's just interesting to think about how much we rely on location services these days.
Yeah, it's almost become second nature for a lot of us.
Okay, let's talk about something truly out of this world. SpaceX just launched the Fram-2 mission, which is the first crewed mission dedicated to exploring Earth's polar regions.
Really? I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. They launched on March 31st on a Falcon 9 rocket, and they're spending about 3 to 5 days up there, orbiting at 430 kilometers.
Wow. So what are they doing up there? Just taking in the views?
Well, they have this special cupola, which is basically a giant window, so they can get these amazing panoramic views of the poles. And SpaceX has already released some footage. It's pretty incredible.
I bet. I'll have to check that out.
Oh, you definitely should. But it's not just about sightseeing. They're also studying these unusual light emissions called STEVEs. They look like these ribbons of purple and green light in the sky.
Huh. That's interesting.
But one of the coolest things, and I think this is something our listeners will appreciate, is that they're doing 22 human health experiments.
22? In just a few days. That's a lot.
I know, right? It's amazing. They're doing the first ever human X-rays in space, studying how to keep muscles and bones healthy in microgravity, monitoring sleep and stress levels, tracking glucose, researching female hormonal health, and even looking at how the crew readapts to gravity when they come back down to Earth. They're going to do an MRI scan right after landing.
That is seriously impressive. NASA called it a huge step forward for understanding human physiology in space.
And the crew itself is pretty fascinating. You have Chun Wang, a cryptocurrency investor who funded the trip, Janica Mickelson, a filmmaker who's the vehicle commander, Rabea Rouge, a robotics researcher and the pilot, and Eric Phillips, a polar adventurer and the mission's medical officer. I mean, what a team.
Talk about a diverse group of people. It really highlights how space exploration is becoming more accessible and how different fields are contributing to it.
Absolutely. Okay, let's bring things back down to earth. Well, virtually at least. Gamers, listen up. Nintendo is hosting a Nintendo Direct Switch 2 presentation on April 2nd.
Oh yeah, I saw something about that. 9 a.m. Eastern time, right?
That's right. And they'll be streaming it live on their YouTube channel.
I'm sure people are going to be glued to their screens for that one.
Absolutely. We got a little teaser back in January, hinting at a bigger screen, possible mouse support for the Joy-Cons, and a sneak peek at a new Mario Kart game.
Okay, but everyone's waiting for the big reveals, right? Like, how much is this thing going to cost?
Exactly. Price and release date, those are the big ones. And there have been some leaks suggesting pre-orders could start as early as April 9th, with shipping in June.
Wow, that's soon. But, got to take those leaks with a grain of salt.
Oh, definitely. But the presentation's supposed to be about an hour long, so there's bound to be some exciting stuff.
All right, let's talk about TikTok. This whole saga just keeps unfolding.
Doesn't it, though? The latest deadline for ByteDance to either sell off their U.S. operations or, well, just give them up, is coming up fast.
April 5th, this Saturday.
But do we really think anything's going to happen right away? I mean, it seems unlikely, right?
Yeah, the general consensus is that there won't be any immediate consequences for us TikTok users here in the U.S.
Which I'm sure is a relief to a lot of people. But there's been a lot of talk about potential buyers. Even former President Trump weighed in, suggesting people like Mr. Beast, Alexis Ohanian, Perplexity AI, and of course, Oracle.
That's quite a mix of names.
It is. But apparently the biggest sticking point is ByteDance's recommendation algorithm.
Ah, their secret sauce, right.
Exactly. It's what makes TikTok, well, TikTok. And they're reportedly not willing to let that go.
Yeah. That makes things tricky for any buyer because getting that algorithm is like the key to everything. I mean, imagine what TikTok would be like without it.
It's hard to even picture. But Perplexity AI has floated this interesting idea. What if they rebuilt the algorithm but as open source and with fact-checking built in?
That'd be a big shift.
Wouldn't it? And Alexis Ohanian has talked about maybe using blockchain technology.
It's fascinating to think about how different TikTok could become depending on who takes over.
It really is. And then there's what's being called option two, which is this idea of letting existing U.S. investors roll over their stakes into a new global TikTok company.
So basically spinning it off as an independent entity.
Something like that. And Oracle could still oversee U.S. user data while ByteDance keeps the algorithm.
Sort of like Project Texas, which we talked about before.
Yeah, very similar. But the legal side of things is still murky. It might not even be allowed under the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act, which basically says they have to get rid of the algorithm.
Right. And you also have to wonder if China would go along with it.
Yep.
And then there's Trump's suggestion of using tariffs as leverage. It's just a really complicated situation.
It is. But for those of you who are worried about TikTok going dark, well, it doesn't look like that's happening anytime soon.
At least not right away. But it really does make you think about how intertwined technology, national security, and global commerce have become.
Okay, let's talk about AI, specifically the whole debate around copyright.
Yeah, this is a big one. A group of British authors, pretty big names like Richard Osman and Kazuo Ishiguro, they wrote an open letter to the UK government expressing their concerns about Meta.
And their main issue is Meta's alleged use of copyrighted material to train their AI models, specifically Llama 3.
Basically, they're saying, hey, you're using our work without permission or compensation. And it's a valid concern, you know. Who owns the rights when AI is trained on all this existing creative stuff?
Right, and this was all sparked by a report in The Atlantic, which suggested that Meta might have used LibGen to train their models.
LibGen, that's that massive online library of, well, pirated books, right?
Yeah, and you can imagine how authors feel about that, their work being used without their knowledge or consent to train AI.
It's a slap in the face, isn't it?
It is. And there's a similar lawsuit going on here in the U.S. against Mark Zuckerberg with authors like Sarah Silverman and Ta-Nehisi Coates involved.
So it's not just a UK issue.
Nope, it's global. And these British authors are saying they feel powerless against these big tech companies. They want the UK government to step in to hold Meta accountable, make them respect copyright laws, and compensate authors for any past infringements.
They're basically saying, don't let AI destroy the livelihoods of creators.
And this whole issue is tied to some proposed changes to UK copyright law. These changes would basically make it easier for AI developers to use copyrighted material.
So it's like they're tilting the scales even further in favor of the tech companies.
That's how a lot of people see it, and the creative community is pushing back. Musicians have released protest albums, there have been open letters signed by people like Paul McCartney, all saying, hey, you can't just steal our work.
It's a battle for the future of creativity, isn't it?
It really is. So for those of you out there who create things, whether it's music, books, art, whatever, this is something to pay attention to.
Speaking of AI, OpenAI just announced that ChatGPT's image generator is now available for free users.
Oh, that's right. It was only for paying subscribers before, right?
Yep. They said they had to limit it at first because the demand was so high. But now they've scaled things up.
That's great news for anyone who wants to play around with it. But there are still some usage limits for free users, like 3 images per day, although some people are reporting different limits.
And generation times can vary depending on how busy their servers are. But one of the cool things people have been doing is using it to create Ghibli-style images from real photos.
Which kind of brings us full circle to that whole copyright debate, right?
It does. Remember how Hayao Miyazaki, the director of all those amazing Ghibli films, he was really critical of AI-generated animation.
Yeah, he called it an insult to life itself.
Which is a pretty strong statement.
It is. And OpenAI has said that the image generator might still act a little weird sometimes or refuse certain prompts. And they've also said they'll take action against anyone who violates their guidelines, but they haven't really explained how they'll do that.
So there's still some uncertainty there. But this whole development really raises some interesting questions. On the one hand, you have this incredible creative tool that's now accessible to everyone. But then you have these ethical considerations about how it's used and the potential impact on artists.
Yeah. It's a lot to think about. So there you have it. We've covered a lot of ground today, from cybersecurity concerns in the government to the legal battles over social media age verification, the arrival of Find My in South Korea, an amazing private space mission, Nintendo's new console reveal, the ongoing TikTok saga, and all the developments in AI, including those thorny copyright issues and the wider availability of image generation. It's been quite a ride through the tech world.
It really has. And as technology keeps changing at such a rapid pace, it leaves us with a lot to ponder. How are we going to handle all these challenges? Security, regulation, the future of creativity, our understanding of ourselves, even the exploration of space. What's going to happen next?
That's the big question, isn't it? And one that we'll be exploring right here on the Deep Dive.
So stay tuned.
Until next time.
See you then.